This video is brought to you by Full Sail University. What's up, everybody? Michael here, and today we're talking about Toy Story and the Lego Movie. Though separated by almost 20 years, these films showcase the inner lives of children's toys and, surprisingly enough, explore the tensions between different conceptions of human freedom. Whether they're arguing that freedom comes from God or that freedom is a fun illusion to keep us from realizing that our brain chemicals are really in charge, both films give us a great excuse to consider the theological, philosophical, and neurological arguments for freedom, or the lack thereof. So are we about as trapped as a toy being tossed around by a kid, or can we assert our freedom like a rogue Lego construction worker? Let's find out in this Wisecrack Edition on Toy Story versus the Lego Movie. Are we all just cosmic toys? And spoilers ahead for movies you likely already know and love. But before we get into it, I want to shout out this video sponsor, Full Sail University. Full Sail offers associate's, bachelor's, and master's degrees in the fields of technology, arts, media, and entertainment. And they just launched a new bachelor's degree in game, business, and esports, which can help students enter the industry from different perspectives, from game development to communications and marketing to competitive gaming itself. And this new major joins a roster of other cool fields of study like film production, computer animation, sportscasting, and web development. With Full Sail University's accelerated coursework, you can finish your degree in about half the time required at other colleges and universities. Plus, you can complete your classes and coursework online or in person at Full Sail's campus in Orlando, depending on what's right for you. Whatever model you choose, you'll get hands-on, real-world experience in the career path of your choice. Plus, Full Sail accepts new enrollments monthly, so you don't have to build your schedule around traditional semesters. To learn more about Full Sail University's new game, business, and esports majors, or any of their other degree programs, visit fullsail.edu/wisecrack. That's fullsail.edu/wisecrack. And now, back to the show. While both films deal with the inner lives of toys, the way these toys' lives are depicted are fundamentally different. In Toy Story, the toys are fully self-aware of their place in the world. They recognize that they are simply a child's playthings, and they seem chill with this reality. In fact, ensuring the happiness of their owner, Andy, is their singular purpose in life.
What matters is that we're here for Andy when he needs us. That's what we're made for, right?
In this way, the toys in Toy Story acknowledge that their purpose is to serve a higher being, or God figure, and that this purpose gives their existence meaning. So, pretty similar to Christianity and other monotheisms. Now, it's a lot easier to believe in a higher being when they can literally pick you up and make you act out a Western, but the movie basically elevates kids to demigod status. Later on, we meet toys who don't have an owner yet, and so they worship the very machine that they're trapped inside, which seemingly indicates a fundamental desire for an orienting external force.
The Claw is our master. Claw chooses who will go and who will stay.
This is ludicrous.
Imagine that. Worshipping the machine you're trapped inside. Couldn't be us. But while the toys are seemingly controlled by a greater power, they also seem to possess some amount of freedom to play, flirt, argue, and love on their own terms, at least when humans aren't looking. And there is a history of this type of freedom, in which a determining theological force, whether a god or a toy-loving kid, still leaves room for individual autonomy or agency. In a classical theological sense, freedom is given to humans by God so that we have the capacity to then freely choose to have faith. For St. Augustine, the freedom of the will lies deeper than the power of choice. It is the power to achieve, and this is the gift of grace. This means that true freedom doesn't come via individual choice. It comes from fully giving oneself up to the divine will. And that's because without God's help, we cannot love and serve either God or our neighbor. Put differently, without the help of a loving Andy, the toys can't fully love Andy or each other. We see the other side of this in Buzz, who is at first unaware of his own toyness and thinks of himself as completely free. For Augustine, this would be a lesser type of freedom, as without accepting the grace of his higher being and owner Andy, he'll never fully actualize his freedom and potential. Buzz's ignorance of his intended purpose, along with some sabotage by Woody, ultimately leads him away from Andy and into the hands of Sid, who is either an evil monster abusing sentient toys for his own pleasure, or just a misunderstood kid who didn't know any better and shouldn't be held responsible for toy abuse. But overall, Toy Story conceives of freedom similarly to old school thinkers like Augustine, who thought that freedom did exist, but only as a precondition for us to properly serve God. Much like Buzz, the characters in the Lego movie also don't know that they're toys. And for most of the movie, the audience has no idea that Emmett and the gang are unaware of their plaything status either. We're initially led to believe that the characters are acting freely, except for the ones who blindly obey Lord/President business. Their struggle to exercise their own free will pits them against a tangible antagonist, and a culture that promotes conformity above all else.
Here it is. Instructions to fit in, have everybody like you, and always be happy.
Little do they know that this struggle for freedom is actually controlled by a kid playing with his dad's toys. Here, the Lego movie seems to be operating in the terms of a more contemporary form of hard determinism, in which freedom is just a functional illusion, and our activities are actually determined by material and biological forces we have zero agency over. In this view, just like physical events can best be understood via causality, i.e., one pool ball moves because another ball hits it, or one atom moves because it's moved by another, what we think of as freedom is really just causality happening inside our brains, i.e., a nerve fires in my brain and a muscle in my arm moves. Emmett and Wildstyle might think they are choosing what they're doing, but it can all be causally explained via the kid who is running the show. For neurophilosopher Patricia Churchland, this literally means that even our moral attitudes and political preferences are predetermined by evolutionary developments in our brains. Meaning, we don't do certain stuff because we're moral or immoral, but because our brains release chemicals that make some stuff feel good and some stuff feel bad. For example, it feels good to come back to this page on Thursdays at 11 a.m. Pacific and watch our stream, Wisecrack Live. It feels bad to miss Wisecrack Live Thursdays at 11 a.m. and have to watch it later on replay where you can't participate in the chat. Just an example that Dr. Patricia Churchland uses in her book. Her brand of determinism, eliminative materialism, argues that most of our understandings of freedom and self-consciousness are simply folk psychological understandings, and that it's only a matter of time until we discover the underlying neural causes for quaint notions like belief, desire, and love. Basically, we're just a bunch of well-intentioned Legos who don't know that there's proverbial kids playing with their dad's toys in the basement of our brains that are actually making it all happen. At this point, it seems that even though they are controlled by an external force, because the characters in Toy Story are aware of a higher power, they're actually more free than the toys in the Lego movie. Woody and Co. can act independently of the child playing with them, and can even leave the child to go out on their own. And some even do permanently, as we'll learn in the sequels. But leaving Andy behind would mean giving up their purpose, which makes it a daunting prospect. By their very nature, the toys in Toy Story are bound to children, because they were created specifically for the purpose of making children happy. But not every toy ascribes to this divine purpose. Buzz Lightyear believes that his purpose is to explore new worlds for Star Command, and this belief upsets the social order of the toys in Andy's bedroom. Buzz doesn't recognize the authority of Woody as the self-appointed leader, and he doesn't seem to care for the laws and customs of the world he finds himself in. In a way, his delusion of free will actually makes Buzz more free than the other toys. Philosopher Daniel Dennett can help us understand the power of Buzz's seemingly illusory freedom. Now, Dennett holds a compatibilist position, which basically means that while everything in the universe is causally determined, the consequences of the illusion of free will are real. This freedom for Dennett is not a freedom from causality, but a freedom to anticipate consequences and avoid undesirable outcomes. It's sort of like being on a train, knowing that you have no agency over where it's going, but accepting your destination willingly and freely considering what you'll do when you get there. The important thing is that by being aware of our position as riders on a train, we can be responsible for how we act on the train and for what we can expect upon arrival. The opposite, of course, is being on a train, but saying to yourself, actually, I am not on a train. I am in control, which would be pretty dumb, right? And while this might sound like an extremely bro who likes science move, modern philosophers like Locke, Hume, and Spinoza held similar compatibilist views on freedom. According to Spinoza, men are deceived because they think themselves free, and the sole reason for thinking so is that they are conscious of their own actions. and ignorant of the causes by which those actions are determined. We see something similar to Buzz's type of freedom in the Lego movie's master builders, who believe in their own free will so much that they're willing to take on the entire system. Now, their concern is not so much with a philosophical concept of free will, but with the very tangible things that are keeping them from exercising their freedom. They embrace freedom as a type of self-determination, by which they can reconstruct society to encourage others to self-determine instead of following the instructions.
All the people of the universe were once free to travel and mingle and build whatever they wanted. But President Business was confused by all the chaos. So he erected walls between the worlds and became obsessed with order and perfection.
Unfortunately, the master builders have found their chosen one in Emmett, who doesn't care all that much about his freedom and who is perfectly content to simply follow the instructions. The movie links the cultural conformity imposed by society with the forced conformity imposed by the state, i.e. their political and economic order. President Business is not just the president of the Octan Corporation, which produces everything from
Music, dairy products, coffee, TV shows, surveillance systems, all history books, voting machines. Wait a minute.
He's also, in his own words, the president of the world.
Hi, I'm President Business, president of the Octan Corporation and the world.
And Emmett is just an unwitting cog in the machine. He's mainly concerned about fitting in with his neighbors and coworkers, which leads him to be a reliable worker as well as a reliable consumer. And Emmett's world is not unlike our own. Because as you know, the two things we're supposed to do are work and consume and sleep so that we can have the energy to work and consume. With the revolving door between business and politics, consumer culture, and a corporate economic model, can our choices really be made freely? Sure, we can choose what music we listen to, or what TV shows we watch. But the choice is only between the selections offered to us by this economic model. It's the difference between freedom of choice and freedom of self-determination. We can choose which politicians to support, but the barrier of entry into politics is so high, you gotta have some solid coin already to even enter the race. And with all of these forces of social, political, and economic control at play, it seems that the philosophical debates about freedom and determinism don't matter as much as the question of whether we have the political will to act freely within our own societies. This may be why, when Emmett is confronted with the fact that he's just a toy, he doesn't seem to mind that much. In contrast, when Buzz learns the truth about being a toy, he has a complete mental breakdown.
I am Mrs. Nesbit.
But unlike his Space Ranger buddy, this doesn't send Emmett into a paralyzing despair, even if it's hard for him to move. He's more concerned with getting back to save his friends, regardless of whether they're just plastic objects with no will of their own. He doesn't have the same existential crisis as Buzz because he accepts the illusion of his free will as something that's still worth fighting for. You could say that Emmett's take on freedom resembles compatibilism in that even if he knows his life has been largely controlled by the man upstairs, he's still assuming a certain type of freedom that is compatible with being moved around the basement by a kid and his dad. But a more interesting way to consider Emmett's actions may be via philosopher Peter Hallward's notion of dialectical voluntarism, which describes what happens when groups of individuals form together in acts of collective will. For Hallward, what's important isn't any metaphysical, theological, or neurological account of freedom, but rather a practical type of freedom, like the one we see embodied by Emmett in the final moments of the Lego movie. Hallward writes that it is the active willing which determines what is possible and what is right and makes it so. As the French Revolution will confirm, it is as willing or practical beings that people have the quality or power of being the cause and author of their own improvement. And Hallward turns to examples like the French and Haitian revolutions to talk about this type of practical political freedom that's driven by the will of the people. And while it feels borderline reckless to compare a Lego revolution to those of actual humans, we do see a similar structure when Emmett and the Master Builders organize to take down Lord/President Business with the aim of creating a free society. Hallward quotes Simone de Beauvoir as saying, "We are free, but freedom is only by making itself be, and that we are free insofar as we will ourselves free." So for de Beauvoir and Hallward, freedom is primarily a thing that you do, and not some sort of metaphysical state that you are. And when Emmett continues to lead his Lego revolution, it doesn't even matter if he's seen the faces of the humans controlling him, because he still has the will needed to create his own freedom.
I am a master builder!
So while both of these films attempt to reconcile our experience of freedom with the various social and material forces that impact us, they come to radically different conclusions. Toy Story tells us that to be happy, we should accept the purpose for which we were created, whatever that purpose may be, even if it's going to patreon.com/wisecrack. The story is resolved when Buzz is brought back into the fold to serve Andy and the rest of the toys. Now, this message, as we mentioned, is complicated in the later films, but that's a story for a different day. In comparison, the Lego movie is only resolved once the institutions of their society are completely broken down, and they're able to form a new one in their wake. So, one film argues for a largely theological or classically metaphysical account of freedom, simply living for our designed purpose. But the other film takes a more radical approach, and ultimately seems to argue that freedom is something that humans are capable of, regardless of their gods or their brain chemistry. What's more, in the Lego movie, freedom is also presented as something that's made possible when folks work together to will their freedom to ensure the freedom of everyone. Or, that is until your little sister is allowed to play with your toys too. But what do you guys think? Do we need an Andy to give our life meaning, or is freedom just a thing we can do? Let us know in the comments. Be sure to like this video if you liked this video. And as always, thanks to our patrons for all your support. Thanks for watching. We'll see you later.